But as we're going into it, one thing that I wanted to touch on is there are position groups out there that are just game changers for a team. Like they have such a level of talent inside of one position room that it totally changes a game. It comes to mind like Georgia's tight end group last year with Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers, that kind of stuff. Totally changed everything for the opposing team on how you defended them, your run fits, everything. I wanted to get your opinion on this year in the SEC. Do you see one position group that's the best in the league across the board?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to stick with Georgia and the offensive line. I mean, you look what not only they returned, but the way they've recruited, and it's not just about the starting five. I mean, we can talk about Amarius, we can talk about all those guys, Van Pran, all those guys up front, but it's the depth that they've accumulated because it's a battle of attrition, especially if you're in the SEC. College football and football in general is a battle of attrition. But if they have a couple guys go down, God forbid, well, they just put some more of the Avengers in there on the offensive line, and that's how you win. And if you're one of these teams that's trying to catch up to a Georgia or an Alabama or with what we see LSU doing, bridging the gap is up front. The offensive line is obviously half of that battle. And Georgia, not only are they good in the zone scheme in the run game, they're agile enough to be able to move lateral, get off combos. But when it comes to the power running game, counter, power, gap scheme runs, trucks, things like that, they're big enough to base block you. And then in pass pro, I mean, running around these guys is like trying to get around Jupiter. It's going to take you forever. And if they get their hands on you, you might as well go ahead and just mail it in. And you can't run down the middle of them. You're not going to bull rush them. So if you're a quarterback, if you're a running back, if you're anybody to skill position, which to me, offensive line is a skill position. You can call it whatever the hell you want. It's a skill position to me. You feel unbelievably comfortable. If you're Carson Beck stepping in there, seeing those monsters in front of you, you almost, I'm sure probably at some point, he almost feels bad for the defenses they're going to have to go up against when he looks those guys in the eyes when they go out there and get ready to start a drive. Not a lot of people huddle up anymore, but I would have to go Georgia's offensive line. It's one reason why I've gotten them going undefeated in the regular season this year.
Yeah, you just look at that position group, and whether it's Xavier Truss, who's been there forever, or whether it's Cedric Von Pron, who may go down, him, Ben Jones, David Andrews, right there, that conversation, maybe the greatest centers to ever play there for the University of Georgia. And when you talk about Ben Jones and David Andrews, they're two guys that have done it in the league for a long time. So having Cedric Von Pron there back is huge. Tate Ratledge, we know how big that was for Georgia last year, getting him back from injury. And Amarius Mims, he's a freak. Like you mentioned, you talked about the Avengers. I mean, he's a guy who he's 6'7", 340, and looks like he doesn't have an ounce of fat on him. So, like, that's the kind of build we're talking about. And as you mentioned with the depth, they've got 4 and 5 stars just waiting to get in and play some ball. So, in terms of that, Kirby Smart did say something in the press conference this past week. He said, hey, somebody asked him how big of a benefit is that to have an experienced center in front of Carson Beck. And Kirby tried to play up his quarterback a little bit and downplay it. He's like, listen, I don't view Carson as an inexperienced quarterback because he's been here for 4 years. But, Jake, when the bullets are flying, it's got to be comforting for him to have Von Pron there who's seen every blitz, who's seen every front, who has to know to – listen, Carson may be – the guy, and he may be really good and been there a long time, but it's different when you have to actually be that guy in the moment, and having an experienced center's got to help, right?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you talk about confidence, and a guy that understands what he's looking at. He can help you with the checks, changing protections. If you get a look that maybe you're not comfortable with, he can help put you in the right spot. And he's a guy on the sideline too, in between drives, that can help vocalize what you're trying to vocalize and keep that group together when it's going good, obviously, and then when it's going bad, which it really doesn't go bad a lot for Georgia, but when it does, you still need that kind of calming presence. And I tell you what, it's one thing, and Carson's been there a long time. And Carson's gotten some scratch, but it's one thing to be a guy that goes in there in garbage time, that's gotten some reps during the game, to be in there in practice. It's another thing to be the guy the whole offseason that everybody pretty much knows you're the guy. They hit it for a while, but Carson was always going to be the guy. I don't care what anybody says. And then you're the guy taking the mantle from Stetson Bennett, who shout out Stetson on making the Rams 53 man roster as well. My brother's in shambles about it. But, having that presence at center, who again is the leader of the offensive line, just like a center fielder is in the outfield. And it's going to do nothing but help Carson and help that whole team. And I thought the story that Kirby told about Cedric during practice last year, getting ready for the national championship game at SEC Media Day, was a really good one. But I'll tell you a funny Ben Jones story. I played at Opelika High School.
Okay.
And we were playing baseball, and we had a pitcher who pitched for Auburn, hell of a player, named Zach Blatt from Valley, Alabama, country, tough, threw about 93, 94, had a slider that would just, handcuff you like you just, got busted by the cops. And I'll never forget, we're playing Bibb County in a tournament beginning of the year, and Zach's just shoving it. I mean, just absolutely shoving it down these guys' throat. But they got this 4-hole hitter, this big guy, big white guy. And he's grunting every time he swings. I'm talking about when he swings, like, just you don't do that in baseball. And so Zach, after the first inning, is in the dugout like, I'm going to hit that. I'm going to hit him. Like, next time he gets up there, I'm going to drill him 94 right to the back. And I think Zach was throwing a perfect game through like 3 innings when he came up against it. Zach decided not to do it. Well, fast forward a couple years later, that big white dude from Bibb County was Ben Jones. And I'll never forget, Zach looked at me and goes, man, I'm glad I didn't hit that guy. It ended up being a good business
on that mound confrontation, huh?
Yeah, that he'd been little more agile than what he looked like he was up at the plate. Hell of a player, great leader. Everything we've heard about him, not only his career at Georgia, but in the NFL. So there's a funny Ben Jones story for you.
Yeah, it's unreal what that guy went through. He told me on a show, he came on as a guest, told me that he broke his collarbone in a game for the Titans, but he had a consecutive game streak going, and it was jabbing up into his neck on the inside, and they taped it down with electrical tape, and he finished the game.
These guys are insane, man. Some of these guys are just insane. Some of the stories you hear about, I mean, just it'll blow your mind how tough these guys really are. And that's not a non-fit. There's no really such thing outside of kicker and punter as a non-holder, as a non-physical position. Center is not a non-physical. You're out there back blocking with a broken collarbone. That gives me the heebie-jeebies, man.
Yeah. So, and I did want to throw an honorable mention out there, and tell me what you think about this. I wanted to throw an honorable mention in terms of best group out there to LSU's wide receiving core. Well, okay. LSU's wide receiving core. I think quarterback, you could go there too, because Garrett Nussmeier's great, and so is Jaden Daniels. But man, those wide receivers, I just don't know. Now adding Aaron Anderson to that group, who Brian Kelly just announced is going to – oh, by the way, he's going to be our kick returner and our punt returner. That tells you what kind of athlete he is. And they've got him at slot receiver, added to Kyron Lacey, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Chris Hilton, all those guys. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and I mean, you got Mason Taylor, too, at tight end, a guy that I think is going to have a special year. And I know they lost some guys. Obviously, Butte didn't really work out his last year there at LSU. It kind of came and went, and then it just went. Best transferred. But, look, when it comes to athletes, especially on the outside, LSU is the last place I'm worried about. But, yeah, I would say them and the quarterback room as well.